Hello, dear friends. Good evening. Meeting again in the session of philosophy. We are discussing regarding the Kant's philosophy, and we have started discussing about the chapter number 9 from Kant's philosophy. A chapter related with the two important aphorisms, aphorism number 10 and 11, where Dr. Samuel Hahnemann tried to explain the concepts of a vital force in disease. So role of a vital force in the process of disease, how the disease develops, where the disease develops, how it reflects, and what is exactly meant by the disease. This concept is very important to understand. Generally, according to the modern science, whatever the pathology which we visualize externally and we label it by the name is considered to be a disease. And this is the wrong aspect of understanding because disease is much prior to it. It is so subtle that you cannot visualize it with the naked eyes. You can understand it only with the manifestations of it in the form of signs and symptoms. And we understand this person is diseased because there are manifestations. It is possible to understand every patient who is diseased only through the manifestations. The disease happens at the dynamic level, at the most innermost layer of the human being, and that is at the level of vital principle or vital force. And once it is diseased, then everything goes wrong. The disharmony happens between mind, body, and soul, and reflected in the form of signs and symptoms. If your concept is clear, you will treat it properly. If you consider that disease is internal and if you find it out a right remedy on the basis of law of similars and give it internally, it hits at the center. There is no need to remove the peripheral pathology with scalpel or with anything because disease is not local. Even you remove the pathology which happens to be there externally, the disease never vanishes. In fact, it goes more inside, affecting more vital organs and damaging the health. And that's why it is very much necessary to understand exactly where the disease is and what is the role of vital force in the process of disease. And this is what he is explaining. We have finished up to the paragraph of that the coarser forms would be comparatively harmless. That's what we have discussed in last lecture. Let us go with next paragraph. What he says. It is only when the vital principle is disturbed by cause of the disease character, that is the innermost of the virus in the form of simple substance, that it gives forth any consciousness of itself. So we can understand the innermost vital force gets disturbed. We can aware about the disease only in the form of signs and symptoms. Without that, you cannot understand. You come and the patient comes to you and you understand that person is diseased because he is having some manifestation. Basically, when it happens early in the life or in the early phase of the disease, it is more functional. There are no tissue changes, there are no cellular changes, and that's why it is more functional in nature. At that time, if you are able to catch right remedy and give it to the patient, the further progress stops. There is no further progress. And that's why the functional disorder, as the disease is more functional, it is more curable. As you sit there, if there were no disturbing influence in the interiors of the man, he never would have symptoms. As you sit there in your seats in a perfect state of quietude or tranquility, you are not conscious of your eyes, of your limbs, of your hair. You have to stop and think whether you feel or not. When all functions are carried on in a perfectly orderly way, you have no consciousness of your body, which means that you are in a freedom. When not in freedom, the individual says, I feel. So, see, very simple way he is explaining. You are not aware about your organs, you are not aware about your head, you are not aware about your eyes, you are not aware about your any system. But once you start getting awareness of it, you start explaining, I feel, and the question starts. It is this disturbance of the invisible character which comes from the cause and appears by changes in the activities of the body, changes in the sensations, changes in the functions. It is in accordance with all wise providence that these sensations should appear to the physician who shall be intelligent enough to read them and know what they mean. They are warning, they are for us, for purpose. No feeling a man can have is without purpose, as there is nothing in the universe without its use. Hence, these morbid sensations reveal the physician that there is a disorder. So, whatever the symptoms comes, they are ultimately the results of this affection of innermost core. Without that, it never happens. And this is one of the important things. In this world, whatever happens, or in this universe, whatever happens, ultimately it is the result of something which affects the innermost self. And once it happens, then it reflects externally. So you have to understand all those concepts clearly. And if you understand them clearly, then you understand what to treat. If you understand this is lies at the center and reflection is at the periphery, then you treat the center. And for treating the center, you have the data, you have the principle law of similars, and you can catch that totality of symptoms, find it out antitype totality in the patient, and just match. That's the simple thing. To establish freedom should be the aim of the physician. And if the physician's work does not result in placing his patient in a freedom, he cannot heal the sick. For healing the sick is placing the patient in freedom, giving him absolute physical freedom. So, if a patient comes with lot of fever, and if you are giving him allopathic medicine, and you give him antibiotic, antibiotic, everything, patient goes home, patient settles, there is no more fever, but he don't have a strength to work. Can you say that he is cured? Because he has not achieved that freedom which was there before the disease. He is not able to work because he is not in freedom. He is restricted with the disease. Only thing is that you have removed only superficial symptoms. If you want to treat that patient properly, then what you have to do? You have to take into consideration all symptomatology, find it out right medicine. And if you give right medicine, even though the fever never disappeared, patient starts feeling better. Fever is, if there was a fever of 104 degree Fahrenheit, now it is 102 degree Fahrenheit, but still patient starts feeling better after 4 hours, 5 hours, 6 hours. He feels I am energetic. I want to do work. I can do. I can walk. I I I want to eat. The generalities when starts improving, it means he is getting freedom from his disease. He's going away from the disease, and that's what is necessary. Kant says that unless and until this freedom is there, you cannot say that your patient is cured. This is what he said. If the physician causes the pain to cease by a dose of morphine, can we call that freedom? Is that patient not made stupid beyond the recognition of nature of his feeling? The large doses of words could produce anything but freedom. So whenever you give morphine, whenever you give any painkillers, whenever you give any allopathic medicine, it never gives the freedom to the patient. What it produces is only the palliation of the symptoms, and many times it may lead to the substitution. But patient never feels I'm feeling better, I'm feeling energetic, I'm feeling normal. We must look elsewhere to find that kind of healing which turns disorder into order and makes man free. By removing the signs and symptoms in an orderly way, by converting disorder into the order so that symptoms no longer have cause. For as we have already seen, when the economy is turned into order, it ceases to give forth symptoms. We place our patients in freedom, both physical and mental. And he explains, once you give homeopathic remedy, depending on the totality of the symptoms to that patient, then that patient's total symptoms disappear. At the same time, he starts functioning in a healthy way. He again goes into the state of order from the disorder, ease from the disease, and that's why he can do whatever he wants. And that is what is the patient's freedom. If you are able to achieve that, you are able to. cure that. If you are not, otherwise you cannot. What he further says, only the vital principle thus disturbed can give to the organism its abnormal sensations and incline it to the irregular actions we call disease. This is totally different from calling results of disease the disease. Example, calling Bright's disease, cancer, or palsy, etc. diseases. Most of the conditions of the human economy are that are called diseases in the books are not diseases, but the results of diseases. See, this is what happens. We learn the diseases from the medicine book. We learn diseases from the surgery. And they are nomenclated according to their presentations, according to their pathology. And whatever it is the only result. So if a patient comes with Bright's disease, what is Bright's disease? It is a glomerulonephritis. It is the end product of the disease. It is not the disease. If the patient is having the calculi, it is the end product of the disease. If the patient is having gallbladder calculi, it is the end product of the disease. If the patient is having fatty degeneration of the heart, it is the end product of the disease. It is not the cause of the disease or it is not the disease itself. Disease is inside specifically at the most inner level where there is a disturbance of this vital principle. And this is what he is explaining over there that this, unless and until you cure this internal vital force, then and then only you can cure that patient. If you try to consider the external peripheral symptoms or renal calculi as the disease or gallbladder calculi as the disease, then you start removing that organ, you start removing that pathology. But disease lies more inner than that. Most of the conditions of the human economy are called diseases in the books are not diseases but the results of disease. To call a group of symptoms a disease, a disease of one part and another group of symptoms a disease of another part is a great heresy and leads to the errors in prescribing that can never be corrected. Heresy means pakandi mat. It is a wrong concept. Heresy means wrong concept. So in one part of the body, there are some symptoms, you label it by one name. Then on another part of the body, there are few more symptoms, you call it as a different name. He says this is the wrong concept. Disease is not like that. In one side it is different, another side it is different. It is the whole human is diseased because of which all those symptomatologies that appear. So disease is at the center. These are expressions. Some are appearing on one side of the body, some are appearing on the another side of the body, but origin is there at the center. So this concept becomes wrong. So this is great heresy and leads to the errors in prescribing that can never be corrected. So if you consider local and disease as a local, you try to remove that locally. Your concept is wrong, your treatment is wrong. If you consider the finger is having gangrene, you remove the finger, gangrene will be cured because this is the logic. But if you consider that patient is diseased inside because of which he is having the gangrene at the periphery, then you treat the center, the gangrene automatically cures. So the concept should be very clear in your mind. If you are able to catch that concept, it is quite easy to find it out right remedy. Organic change is the result of the disease. Underline this sentence, very important. Every organic change is the result of the disease. It is not the cause of the disease and it is not the disease itself. Morbid disturbances can be pursued solely by means of the expression of disease in the sensations and actions. We would have no means of perceiving the morbid disturbance of invisible principle except by morbid sensations, and if these were not present, we would have no means of putting the patient in freedom. There are patients so sick that they cannot be put in freedom. Those from whom there are no means of cure, and in these, while the internal structural changes are going on slowly, the morbid symptoms are not present. Such patients continually change doctors and change climates, recognizing as it were that no one is capable of relieving them. With an incurable change in the vital organ, all or most of the symptoms that existed go away. The symptoms of the disease are suppressed, as it were, by the tremendous strain upon the system. So he is explaining what happens many times pathology develops and it goes beyond the limit, beyond control. And once it happens, then it becomes rather difficult. The curable disease becomes incurable because there are no symptoms. Once the symptoms are totally lost, it is quite difficult to cure that patient. If you are able to catch the disease in functional level, then it's quite easy to treat that. Even early pathologies you can treat very easily. But the pathologies which are beyond control, then many times there are very less symptoms, and if there are no symptoms, then it is quite difficult to catch a remedy for them. Then the person who was curable in earlier state can become incurable. But still, if such types of patients are there, whose susceptibility is totally lost, whose totality is expressing over there, and such types of patients, if you find it out a remedy, according to the Hahnemannian method, which is explained in fifth aphorism, that is 7 important entities with which you can investigate that patient and find it out a right remedy. That is ascertainable physical constitution of the patient, his moral and intellectual character, then his occupation, the mode of living and habits, then his domestic and domestic relations as well as the social relations, then the age, the sexual function with which you can approach to the remedy. And if you can try with the homeopathy. If patient remains in the state of cure, he get cured. If he is beyond that, same remedy acts as a palliative. And that is what is the concept of palliation in homeopathy. There is no separate palliative which is there in allopathy. So if it is incurable, allopaths give the palliatives in the form of morphines. Such type of palliation is not the homeopathic palliation. When you treat such patients with the homeopathy, the same remedy acts either a curative, either a palliative, depending upon the stage. And you cannot differentiate. There is no line of demarcation which is curable and incurable. The remedy itself decides whether a patient is in curable state or incurable state. And it acts either curatively or either palliatively. So these things which you have to understand over there. So concept once your concepts are clear, then it is quite easy to treat such types of patients. And he further says, this is particularly true of malignant forms of disease results. The symptoms that existed years ago have disappeared, and patient says, "Oh, they did not amount to anything. I had them all my life." But those are the symptoms that would manifest to the physician the nature of remedy, for they give to him a real image of the sickness. So whenever patient was in earlier state where it was functional in origin, at that time when the disease vanishes or disease appears, it is very easy to find it out a remedy. But once the symptoms are lost and now only pathology remains over there, there is very difficult or it is very difficult to catch the right remedy. And when such patients, if you ask what were the symptoms, then if patient is able to explain you the symptoms, then it is quite easy to reach to the right remedy. Because symptoms and signs, this is the language of the disease. And this language itself is very important to catch a right remedy. Some doctors say, "Oh, we will have a remedy for cancer someday," having in mind only the symptoms of cancer, that is, the symptoms that represent the results of disease and not the symptoms that represent the disease itself. There is a vast difference between these two. The physicians would not talk so if they only knew and would only think in this proper and wholesome fashion that to cure the patient would be to cure the cancer. And in order to cure the patient, it is necessary to go back into his history and get those symptoms that represent patient in state of disease and not the tissues in the state of disease results. So he's explaining exactly the concept. If you once says that I have cured the cancer, you are considering your symptoms of cancer. You should not talk like this. You can say that yes, I have cured the case of cancer. a patient of a cancer, not a cancer. Because if you treat that patient, you have removed that disorder which lies before the cancer. Because the cause is there inside, which is reflected in the cancer. So what to treat? Whether to treat cancer or whether to treat individual. If you treat the individual, nothing requires. The cancer will automatically get cured. But if you try to find it out your remedy only on the basis of cancer, you are on the wrong path. Then you might get result if your remedy finds to be the same which is internal remedy. But if you find wrong remedy, for local remedy, it will act either palliative or suppressive. It will not cure the patient. And that's why the concept should be clear in your mind that disease always represents itself in the signs and symptoms, and you have to catch those signs and symptoms. What he says further, in the latter state, the original symptoms of the disease have often disappeared. They are, as it were, swallowed up. So it is when the innermost disease has acted and the whole body is full of disease results, such as dropsical conditions, or pus sacs, or hip joint abscesses. The pains makes the patient unable to think of his symptoms. Then these physicians come along and prescribe for the resultant states and end in failure. They give silicea for hip joint disease and bufo for epilepsy and so on, giving medicines for the group of symptoms. If you consider pathology and if you just find it your remedy only on the basis of pathologies, you cannot cure. If you want to cure, then you need what patient presents, what symptomatology it presents. You should not fix your remedy on the basis of epilepsy, bifo, or post formation, silicea. It is not like that. Bifo has its specific indications. Cuprum has its own specific indication. Ginkam has its own specific indication. Without that, you cannot come to the right remedy. For example, if a patient comes to you with a dwarfish patient along with epilepsy, and he used to get epileptic attacks only at night. Now you get something characteristic which defines the before. Dwarfism associated with epilepsy, associated with convulsions only at night, then you might think about the before. But with epilepsy, you cannot think. Another patient epilepsy comes, and you get the history that 6 months back he had an severe attack of fungal infection and was treated with long time treatment with steroid local ointment, and this disappeared and he got epilepsy. Then you might think about the ginkgo metallicum. So every patient is different. Every patient presents the disease in a different manner, and your remedy never depends upon the name of the disease. Your remedy depends upon the individualization. So you should not think pathologically to treat the patient. You should think individualistic way to find it out what is characteristic which gives his individuality to in your case, and that defines the remedy. And once you understand this, then it becomes quite easy to reach to the right simile. That is not homeopathy. Such men then go off and say, "Oh, I have tried everything," but they have tried nothing but the modern practice. It is a travesty upon homeopathy. So this is the way if they are applying allopathy with the homeopathy because they are treating the pathologies, and this is wrong. The expert physician can listen to the signs and symptoms before morbid changes have taken place, and if no medicines have ever been administered. If no drugging has been resorted to, no morphine and no other violent and vicious drugs, the image stands out before him in relief, and it is perfect because it has not been meddled with. It speaks with the clearness, and the physician who is intelligent can learn to read it. So the physician who is best listener, who understands the patient, he sits with patient, asks what was there before taking any allopathic medicine, before taking morphine, before taking anything. And then those symptoms, which are original functional states of the patient, if you are able to catch, you can give a right remedy. You can catch a perfect simillimum. Because those functional symptoms are the real symptoms, which are individualizing features and which finds a very perfect picture for you. But the physician who is not capable of seeing this, that this is different from the group of pathological symptoms that represent so-called fixed diseases, if he cannot make a distinction between symptoms that represent disease per se and symptoms that represent result of the disease, he will never practice homeopathy successfully. Disease per se means the symptoms which are not covering the pathology, but symptoms which are indicating individuality, which are more functional before the pathology develops. And disease symptoms means where you find it out, the pathological symptoms. If he cannot understand it, he had better work at it until he does understand it. He must continue to labor until he can discriminate. Discriminate means to differentiate. He can discriminate between the organic symptoms associated with the results of the disease and the pure signs giving forth by nature. Every few days, I run across homeopathic physician who asks, what remedy are you using in such and such case? And such a thing has no place in my mind, and I looked upon one who speaks in that way as a man untrained in homeopathics. I truly have lost my practice over such things. For the old grey hairs who have practiced for years and pretended to practice homeopathy, do not hesitate to say that the best remedy for epilepsy is so and so. So he is explaining that if you are treating the patients on the basis of names of diseases or pathological trends, you are not treating the patient. Here you are talking in the allopathic sense, modern sense, and one should not talk in this sense. Consider that you have not treated a disease, but you have to treat a deceased patient. So your diagnosis will not going to give you a right remedy, but what patient presents gives you a exact right remedy. So the concept becomes very clear in our mind, even though the patient comes to us with a perfect pathological picture. We have to go before in the history, find it out what were the symptoms prior to this, what were there the symptoms which are functional and which were defining the individuality. Once you get those symptoms, then it becomes rather simple to catch the remedy. So that's all for today. Tomorrow we might finish that chapter in tomorrow's session so that the concept becomes more and more clear in your mind. So that's all for today. We'll conclude over here, and tomorrow we'll meet with the same chapter. And in the evening, we'll continue with sulfur, which was we have discussed only one lecture for sulfur. It will take 4 5 lectures. So today evening at 8:30, we'll meet with the sulfur again. So that's all for today. We'll meet again. If any queries are there, we can have a chat. Otherwise, we'll conclude. So we'll meet at 8:30 sharp. Okay. Thank you.